I'm so excited that you're here, and I'm so excited that I'm here. So I just wanted to do a quick pulse the group, kind of get to know who's here. So who has already written, let's just start with written. Who's already written a book? Awesome. Who has one published? Awesome, very cool. Let's see. Who is or has someone in their immediate family with a disability of some kind? Okay, cool, very cool. Who flew?
How many hats can we put?
Right. Yeah, I would have at least 4. How about who flew in? Who's here from somewhere else? Very cool. I'm from Michigan. Lansing area?
Grand Haven.
Nice. Very cool. I like it. I like the Midwest. It's very chill. So, excellent. We'll jump in. My name is Ashley Nance. I'm supposed to project, so let me know if you can't hear me in the back. I'm doing my best.
Is the microphone not working?
It is, but it's only for the camera. So she's told me that I need to project, which is fine because I do that anyway. I'm loud. This is my mother in the front, so when I keep looking at her, that's why my mother is here. And my sister was just here. She left. She's not staying for the conference, but she's Crystal. So you have Crystal Puzzle. She's Crystal. She's read the book. She loves it. So if you're reading through and you're like, does she know about this? Yes, she's read the whole thing. She thinks it's great. So we are going to talk about writing about people who have disabilities, fictional or nonfiction. It's the nonfiction track because it's definitely on that end of things, or should be, without tripping over ableist tropes. I've also described this to family members who want to know what I'm presenting on how to write a book about disability without getting canceled, which is both of those things are true. And I know, especially within the group of authors of faith, there's always a question of what can we put in this book and it will still go out there. That how real can I be? Because it feels like real on the side of not faith is totally fine. You can go as far as you want and it'll still make it. But if you're going to talk about faith, it's a little bit more tricky and it feels like there's a line that needs to be walked. So that's what we're going to talk about. Faith, diversity, inclusion, a lot of these principles are the same. So I don't have we gave out all my books, so I don't have one to hold to show you. But
I just realized I'm in the wrong book.
oh, that's okay. That's okay. No judgment. And I have tons more, so find me afterwards and I will give you one anyway. But I'm glad to have a visual aid. So I wrote this book. This came out in 2015.
Still.
I'm sorry?
Okay. It's published by Familius.
Yes, Familius is the publisher when they were still babies.
One of their co-founders is doing a class, a session.
I'll have to see if I know them.
Christopher Robbins.
Oh, he's here! Yay! Okay, so my husband and I were one of his first interns. We were his social media interns when they were still babies. Christopher Robbins from Familius. He's a publishing company. And so, which is part of the reason why it was easy for me to get published, because I actually knew the guy. And that's fun. And super quick aside, I do know a publisher. So if you want to run something by me, he will read anything I send him. So anyway, so back into my presenter mode. So Crystal Puzzle came out in 2015, and it's about my journey through life alongside my sister has Asperger's syndrome. And it never did super well. Nobody really hated it. There's a couple of people that said there's a little bit too much religion in it for some audiences. And I'm like, meh, that's fine. I talked about the Hill Cumorah pageant. They did push back a little bit on some of the things I put in and said, if you want this to be to general audience, you need to tone this back, but you can still talk about God. So I'm like, okay, fine. So I did that a little bit. But for the most part, it's exactly what I wrote with very few edits. And I'll talk about why that's a good thing and a bad thing in a second. And then, so recently I wanted to revive it. 2015 was a tough year for me. I had I had 3 kids at the time. My husband was about to go to China for a school year to teach, and I was about to move to New York. So I really wasn't in a place where I could promote the book and really make it get out there and cause a buzz. So it didn't really take off, because even if you go through a publisher, there's a lot you as an author needs to do to make it take off. Ultimately, I ended up with several boxes of it, and now you can only get it through online. You can get it online still, or from me. I have several. And I wanted to revive it. I was like, I'm in a better place in my life now. I feel like I can do podcast tours and guest blogging and whatever. So I posted a picture of it and a description of it on a group of entrepreneurs to ask for their feedback. What should I do to remarket this book? What is your suggestions? And a lady on there was a copywriter who is on the autism spectrum herself, just lit into me. Like, this is inappropriate, you shouldn't be using those words. And I was like, whoa, I clearly missed something huge. And so we're gonna walk through the process of what I learned from that interaction. We're gonna look from the example of the mistakes, the things I did well and not well in my book, so you cannot make the same mistakes. And we're going to walk through a process and analyze some popular books about disability through the lens of what I learned from my experience, so that you can do what you need to do in your own writing. So the first thing she said is that the title is offensive, Crystal Puzzle. Right? So the reason I chose Crystal Puzzle is pretty obvious. Puzzle is associated with autism. Crystal had autism, and it was a puzzle that I figured out. I'm a very analytical human. I analyze everything. I want to figure out why it goes the way that it goes. And so I was constantly almost running tests on my sister. Not really, but like in my head, like, why does that happen? Why does she do that? What does she mean by that? And I've learned more about autism and more about the whys since this was even published. I'm a much more sensitive and knowledgeable human now than I was in 2015. But this was really my story. This is my story of growing up alongside someone with a disability. My idea was that this could be the friend that I wished I had, that understood that even though my sister looks normal, that there are challenges that I have and face that are different from what another sibling of another person would face. So she said the puzzle part is offensive specifically because it was kind of grabbed onto by Autism Speaks. And so you've all heard of Autism Speaks. No, okay, you have not heard of Autism Speaks. So Autism Speaks is a nonprofit that, at least ostensibly, raises money to help kids on the spectrum. And for the first little while of its life, it did a pretty good job of that. And it made the puzzle piece its thing. Like, autism is a puzzle, we're figuring out the puzzle. And that was how puzzle piece became associated with autism, was a huge part, and because of Autism Speaks. Then they started moving a little bit towards, let's get money, how can we get more funding? And in doing that, they took more of a how do we fix autism and go into research around fixing autism.
Good.
And thank you, that is the correct response. That is the correct response. And getting funding that way. Like, don't you want us to fix autism? Don't you want us to whatever? And so, understandably, the autism community did not like that. And if you go into any autism Facebook groups now, a lot of times in the things you have to agree to before you can join the group is that you need to not promote Autism Speaks in any way. Right in there. And when that shift happened was in 2015. So, take away from that, there are some things entirely outside of your control that there's nothing you can do about. And it's just life. So before 2015, puzzle was fine. Afterwards, they're like, what do you mean we're a puzzle? What do you mean you need to solve us? What are you talking about? It's like, no, I'm trying to figure out how to figure you out. But if I'm honest, as a kid, I was trying to figure out how to make her normal, or at least like figure out how to coexist with this person that isn't normal. And now, and I'd be saying all of this if she was sitting here, I will have you know. But now I realize that autism is a description of an entirely different way of thinking. It isn't a disability at all. It is literally a difference. I just made a friend. We could chat for hours after this. It is not a disability at all. A lot of times people think of it as a disability because many times it's comorbid with things that are disabilities that make it difficult to speak, and they're nonverbal. A lot of times they have epilepsy. I learned that from Temple Grandin like 2 months ago. A lot of times it's comorbid with epilepsy. It makes it difficult for them to speak. It makes them it harder for them to understand. But the fact is, autism describes a sensitivity to input. Temple Grandin describes it as a very huge like input sensor, but a very small processor. So all more than most of us see, think, sense goes in, but less than we have access to is able to process it. So a lot of times they're in processing mode and it takes them longer, and they get overwhelmed more easily because of that process. Now, when this was published, I had, and did not know I had, a husband and a daughter on the spectrum. And now I understand autism a lot better. And I also understand what it means to be part of the autism community better. And I know how to be a better autism citizen. So what have I learned from this process that I can apply to all the disabilities? We'll walk through that. And it also applies to other diversities that we have, other minority, or what somebody called it, minoritized groups, because that's really what it is. We're all the same, but people have decided some people are on the fringes. The other thing that was offensive was Asperger's. I was annoyed when they took Asperger's off of the DSM, off of the diagnostic criteria, because it was what I was used to. But really it's become high-functioning autism versus low-functioning autism. But as I just explained, that's completely inaccurate, because you have autism and nothing else, or autism and something else. There's no, autism is a difference, not a disability. It's just a way of thinking. So, and Asperger's was also the name of somebody who identified people with issues for Hitler's Germany as part of that cleansing process. Like, ugh. Okay, so I really, really screwed up the title.
Can I ask,
Please.
the Hitler thing, you're saying they identified, did they put those people to death that had Asperger's?
It was like Jews and gays and gypsies
Right.
and Asperger's. Yeah, it's just kind of all together. I haven't researched it into like super in depth, but that was my understanding, is that the man, Asperger's, was identifying these people on behalf of the Hitler's Germany thing.
Unethical testing.
A lot of their unethical testing, yes. Also, and so I chose to take a Pahoran Moroni tact with this lady who did this. So when you're thinking about, and really anything you're writing, whether you're writing about super sensitive subjects or something completely fine, that when you're going through the editing process, that's when your heart meets the world. This thing that you've invested in, you've written, you've cried, you've prayed, you've done all this, and it's here, and you're gonna give it to somebody else to read, and it's really stressful. But if you think of it like Moroni Pahoran, where when the edits come back, you're still the author. You still know what your purpose is, and you can take that like Pahoran did and say, okay, I see you have some information I was not privy to. Now I understand what is going on, and I have a clear idea of what I need to do moving forward, which isn't necessarily what you told me it was, but I have a different idea than what I had before. So let it be an informative guiding process even if they're not super nice about it. So
You mean
Yeah.
Moroni?
Moroni accused Prohorin.
Prohorin's letter.
No, both of them.
Really mad at
Yeah.
Prohorin.
Really harsh letter.
Yeah,
Right. But
Right.
Moroni changed once he got the letter and went. "Oh,
exactly. Both of them did. Both of them did. It was a joint thing. So Moroni was like, "What are you doing? People are dying." He's like, "Huh? Okay, I understand. How about you come and help me?" And he's like, "Okay, yeah, let's do that." So there was humility on both sides. There's a huge amount of humility necessary in the editing process, regardless, and more so if you are writing about anyone that isn't you, fictional or non-fictional. Because you're the ultimate authority on your own story, but you know nothing, relatively nothing, about another person. Even if it's a fictional character you invented, that character represents people, groups, ideas, concepts, eternal principles that can speak for themselves. So the process for vetting your book. So I've got this whole thing written, ready to send it to Familius. There's some steps, if I had to go back, that I would take if I had it to do again, that you could take. One thing I did right with this is there was a writing book that I read at the time that said, before you write anything, ask yourself what you want this book to do. So the first question is, why are you writing this book? What do you want to accomplish by writing anything? Because if you're writing for yourself, for your posterity, to inform, to just get your life on paper, or even your stories out on paper for posterity, that's a completely different set of rules than if you want to be a New York Times bestseller. Completely different process. And the kind of book you can write and is different. You have to, if you want a New York Times bestseller, you need to know what the trends are, what the trends are going to be in 2 years, because that's how long it's going to be before you get it published. And these kinds of things, it's a completely different process. And there are certain books you just can't write, because nobody cares. At that level, on that tiny string of things, a New York Times bestseller, versus if you're writing your history down. See, this is a really great history. All of my kids who can read have read this. I'm like, wow, I learned something about you, and I learned something about Aunt Crystal, and it's been great. Friends who know me have read this. I've even had a couple of people who have children, grandchildren with disabilities who are like, I felt seen and heard, and it was like super powerful for them. But somebody who doesn't know me and is autistic wouldn't be able to make it through 3 chapters. It would be really hard, because it's not for them. And that's the next question you ask yourself. So after, why am I writing this book? Who is it for? Because that also changes. It's a huge difference between why you're even writing the book, what you can do, and now we're refining the process. Who is it for? When I'm not writing, I am also writing. I am a marketer. I write commercials. I write the junk mail that you get, sorry. Not here though, because you're in Utah, only the Michigan people get mine. So I write. And one of the things that the difference between a well-done piece of marketing, which, let's be honest, your book is a piece of marketing, and not great, is how much market research went in beforehand. So if you're writing for siblings of people with autism, for example, you need to talk to a whole bunch of them and read some of the things they've written. To be fair, I did do this. There is not a lot. There wasn't a lot out there in 2015. I read a book by a lady who had a intellectually disabled sister who got this close to being sent to an institution, but they ended up keeping them in the home. I was like, yes! And other things like that, but nobody had written about growing up alongside someone with autism. It just hadn't been done. So I only had an N of 1. What I didn't realize, and at the same time, in 2015, these weren't available, autism family support groups. Yes?
Now, is she high or low functioning?
She is mostly high functioning. She does have a learning disability. I don't know if it has anything to do with autism. It's just kind of a thing. And I'll talk to you about some of the biases that I learned in the book that helped me. But yeah, she has or can be employed. She can live on her own. She can buy her own groceries. She doesn't drive because problem solving is hard.
Yeah, there's too many variables.
Too many variables. Like if no one ever did anything stupid, she could drive. But we all know that's too much to ask. It does.
Kind of middle.
Yeah. I
Kind of middle function.
would say, I don't know. High-low functioning is really super controversial to even talk about. But she is, she can do things. She can go on dates. She can, whatever. She can do things. But she is 18 months younger than me, whatever that means. What? 36-ish? Yeah, in there somewhere. So, and she's very happy with her life, which is, what more can you ask for? Let's be real. Lots of people who are more able than she is hate every day they're alive, and that's no good. So if you can, read successful books from your audience, which is much more like people can do that now, because now I feel like the doors have kind of swung wide open, and you have good and bad books by people with disabilities, for people with disabilities. While when I was writing, it was mostly researchers telling, like maybe they asked a bunch of kids what they thought and then they wrote it all down. Even that would have been better for me to have read that than to just kind of go on my own. And then this lovely little, what? It's a black Expo marker with a white tip. That's not helpful. Okay, so this is a little tidbit from Seth Godin, which if you read all of his books, you would not have wasted 1 second of time. I'll write it in. Thrash. I can't even write. I can't talk and write at the same time. Thrash early. Seth Godin. It's a weird name. And if you're looking for him and you find a guy with a goofy, bald head, orange glasses, you've got the right guy. Yes, he's a marketer. And he also, This Is Marketing is a really good one for authors. And then there's another new one. I'll have to look it up after. Thrash early is one of the things he likes to say. And what that means is not before you've created it, so wireframe it out, maybe write the manuscript, but before you get too far into the process, get lots of feedback. So it's not the last thing you do before you send it to the publisher. You've got, like, I'm thinking about this concept here, group that this will ultimately be for. What do you think? And get feedback at that point, and then implement their feedback. How about now? How about now? How about now? And then when you feel like they're happy, then you can kind of maybe add some more in, or present it to a more critical group, or a group of people that would be more sensitive to the fact that, like, they would actually be offended and not want to talk to you anymore if you got it wrong in the first stage. So now you've got something that you can really say, what do you think? At some point you're going to find a line and you'll know where it is. Yes?
Question. When you say get feedback, who are we getting the feedback from?
So,
Like friends? And
yes,
like
so
professionals?
that's good. So the question is, where do you get feedback from? Start with the people who like you. Start with the people who like you. People who will give you, like, gentle feedback. Like, okay, like, not to the point of, like, thank you. Thank you. Oh, okay. Well then. Start with people who like you. And then go to other writers that you don't know, who have no, like, they don't feel the need to please you, but they're also in the same journey as you. And then once you have that, then you can go to interest groups that are interested in things that you're writing about. So Facebook is my go-to market research tool. There's a group for everyone. So I'm part of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I don't even know, groups that have to do with autism. One of the groups I'm part of, they will let somebody in that isn't autistic if they promise to only listen. So I can't say anything, which is perfect. I like that because they will ask for advice from each other. Like, what do you do in this situation? I humiliated myself. What do I do? Am I the only one who's ever experienced this? And I'm watching like what they're asking for support for. I'm learning about what they feel like, and they're asking things like, is this autism, or is this just me? Is this something that's common, or is it? And the people who are super secure are asking different questions, and the people who just are wondering if they are, and the positivity and the uplift that's available to them is just so happy. So start with people who like you, go to writer friends, and when you feel like you've done everything your network can know how to do, find a completely different network that has people in it that will thrash your stuff. Or thresh it, you know, it's kind of like go through it, not like beat it up, that's not what it means, but like get the yucky out and identify what's the best stuff.
Are there some of those groups you talked about on Facebook and stuff who wouldn't mind being asked to?
Yes, they will make it very clear. So that's the cool thing about Facebook groups, is that, especially disability focused, because there are so many people like moms that will come in and say, my kid is doing this, how can I fix it? And they're like, don't ask us that question. Whereas others, there's another separate group, which it's funny. So the group who says, don't ask me that, has in their description, if you need these questions answered, go to this group, which is full of autistic people who feel secure enough in whatever their life to be asked offensive questions and answer them respectfully. And so Facebook is a fantastic resource. I don't love it for pretty much anything else. I mean, catching up with pictures and this, market research for books. It's fantastic. And my advice is just like, join and sit. Let other people do the stupid things first and get yelled at for it, and then be like, okay, I understand how to exist in this space. And if it's not going to be that helpful because you can't run a manuscript by anybody or even vet questions, you can just go somewhere else and no harm done, but you've learned something. And I know this is true for, I'm part of a deaf-blind group. I'm part of I don't think I've joined a cerebral palsy group yet, but like there's something for literally everybody. And there's one for parents, and there's one for adult siblings. I'm part of a sibling group that's non-specific, just any disability at all. Adult siblings of adult siblings that have to do things and are stressing and they're venting or they're celebrating, like, he drove to his own work today, woo! And you have a bunch of people who are like, that's amazing. So really, there's a Facebook group for everybody, and you can vet ideas. And for me, I actually found this individual in a group, I need to stop tapping that, in a group of entrepreneurial women. So that's another thing. You don't have to go to necessarily a focused group. You could just go somewhere where people think things, which is pretty much everywhere. So it could be LDS-PMA is probably a little small, like that could be your first or second round, but for like more people, you could go to forward-thinking business women or, stuff like that. Go ahead.
Would you send them your entire manuscript?
Not necessarily. You can start, because there's a good chance that if you put out your concept, and they're like, wow, that's really cool, I would love to know more. Whereas if they're like, ooh, be careful with that because you need to watch for this and this. So I would say put a little bit out there and see what kind of feedback you get. So it's really like an incremental process. And really, it's a good idea to do this with everything you write, but especially when you're talking about sensitive subjects for sensitive populations, it's especially important. And it's the other thing you can do if you want to go fast and furious, which I haven't done yet, but I want to, it's on my to-do list. There actually is such thing as sensitivity editors. So entire editing houses that have someone who's gay, someone who's been domestically abused, somebody who has cerebral palsy, somebody who has autism, somebody who's a combination of 4 of those. Like, it's insane how many people they had. I was scrolling through different kinds of people for at least 20 minutes in this one particular one that I was looking at. And so the editor that I used said, sometimes we tell people we're not even going to touch this until they've seen it, because it's going to be an entirely different book once they're done with it. And it's really a powerful thing. And if you realize they are going to thrash your book, it's a really quick and easy way to avoid the, how about this, how about this, how about this? It does cost, but they're professionals. They understand what tropes they're likely to see, how to explain them to you in a way that you'll understand, and then you can choose what you want to do. And then sometimes when you get it, so you get it thrashed, either you get it edited by people in cyberspace, by a sensitivity editor, or some combination, then you have to kind of go back to your, who is it for? Because who they want it to be for may not be who you're writing it for. And so you have to come back to the first question, why am I writing this book and who is it for? Because ultimately, this book is not for autistic people. So would I do it again differently? 100%. But what I would mainly do is let my sister tell her part of the story, because this is all my story. Has she read it? Yes. Is there a little cute interview section in the back where I ask her some questions? Sure. But I could have done better. I didn't know to do better, so I really couldn't have done better, but my current self can. And I've even thought of, there's graphic novels where they have like a conversational thing and then it's illustrated. That would be super accessible to a sibling who is 11, 12, 13 and be like, wait a second, why is my family so weird and so different than everybody else's? Which is what every single 11, 12, 13-year-old is thinking, but they're gonna blame the outlier for the whole thing. So it could be a really valuable resource, and that's what I'm exploring doing with it now. And re-releasing it. I almost pulled it from the shelves because I was so upset that it could be that offensive. But then I went back to, who is this for? And the fact is, it's not for autistic people. And the people who have read it, I had one lady from my ward, she's like, yeah, thank you enough for writing this book. It was so beautiful, and I learned so much, and it just made perfect sense. And she was just like, she raised her kids in the 60s and 70s. Like, to know that there are other moms, other places going through similar struggles was a huge load off of her, and it was enlightening to her. And I can accomplish the good that this did better by doing it again in a different format. But ultimately, even my second book won't be for autistic people. I do want it to not offend them, though. So it's not going to be like, not going to tick all their boxes necessarily, like autism activists specifically, but because there are feelings of why can't they be normal? Like, the fact that that is true is offensive, but it's still true. And so that's something that I have to think, who is it for, and that. So quick, I'm going to take a break for questions and thoughts, anything else. Where are you sitting? What are you thinking?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm wondering with activists,
Sure.
I imagine you do hear from them.
Oh, yes.
And you mentioned that you find your line. If you could go into that a little
Yes,
bit.
I did. I said when you find your line. So people will push you like, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. Because like he, she, they, like they're gonna go down the list of things that as a politically correct, social active citizen, you need to tick all of these boxes. The fact of the matter is you really don't. You need to decide, where are you? So, how to describe what I'm feeling here. With activists, they always, a lot of times if you can engage humbly with them, you'll get down to the core of what they really are wanting to communicate with you, which in this case was, it's not fair to tell a story about someone else and make all the money from it. Ultimately, that's what her complaint was. I'm like, 100% get you. That I can do. Some of the other changes, in this particular individual, I feel like I would integrate all of her changes, but I know she said things like, nobody with autism is going to take that seriously, which may or may not be true. She's an N of 1, ultimately. So then you go to other people and think what they think. What do they think? Puzzle has been so demonized at this point, there's no hope for this title. It's just the way that it is. But a lot of people call themselves Aspies still. And they love that name. They've identified with that, and it means something to them. So I might not put it in the title, but I'd probably leave it in the book, because she would say, I have Asperger's syndrome. I have Asperger's. And she would explain things, and that's how she identified herself. So it's fair to use that label because it's her words. So that's the kind of thing. People will say, no one's going to blah, 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 whatever. And you have to decide, like, feel in your heart, where's the line between what I'm contributing to the conversation and what the conversation is contributing to me? And find a good tension. It really is a tension. It's not a balance. It's a tension. What am I willing to fight for? And what am I willing to give so that that tension is in the right place? That makes sense? Okay, Julie, you had a question.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you're going to change the title, and it sounds like you are.
Yes. So I'm going to rework this book entirely. I've already started interviewing my sister about the things that she remembers, about the things I remember. So she's younger than me, and she has an excellent memory about what she has a memory about. And when it doesn't matter, it's gone, baby, gone. So I've interviewed her about, like, what do you remember about the farm? And what do you remember about this? She doesn't remember any individual experiences from the first chapter-ish of this book. And I was actually amazed when we moved from New York to El Paso, we were all devastated, but she was excited. I didn't know that until I asked about what she remembered about our move. I had no idea. I'm like, that was in 1995. And I went this whole time not knowing that you were like, all right, a new adventure. Okay. So yes, I'm interviewing her, and my idea is now moving forward to pitch a new book. Let's see if Familius will do it again. We'll see. Where our experiences are side by side. I remember what I remember and what she remembers, what she knows, what I know, and the experiences she had. Like I was not bullied in middle school, she was. And so she has different experiences about middle school than I did. I was just embarrassed she was there with her goofy. She had a clear backpack because it was right after Columbine, so everybody had to do something. And they took out, in our middle school, they took out the lockers and made everybody carry stuff in backpacks, which made no sense to me. And then when we moved back to New York, they made us keep things in lockers and didn't let us carry a backpack. But yeah, but she had to have a clear backpack so everyone could see what was in it. But she couldn't go to the locker every time. So that was an adaptation they made, which made her stick out like a worse or something, and she already did. I was like, do you guys want her to fail at being a socialite in high school? So, but that's not even something that made it into her memory. She doesn't even, I'm sure she remembers it, but she doesn't remember being picked on for it because nobody mentioned it specifically, and it just wasn't an issue. So the side-by-side, I feel like, would be more instructive, and it accomplishes that tension between what I was feeling and how hard it was, and how I'm like, why isn't she this way? And her just living, and her blithe way of being alive. She didn't ever hold a grudge against anyone. She ultimately got to the point where she could recognize this person will never be nice to me, so I need to avoid them. That's as far as she ever got. She doesn't hate anybody. She doesn't hold a grudge. And if I did something that was not nice, the next day she's forgotten it. I remember I apologized once. I was like, I was not nice to you. I'm so sorry. She's like, I don't even remember. Don't worry about it. I'm like, fine.
She's when I talk to people who know her but haven't seen her in a while, they're like, how's Crystal? I
Right.
have 5 children. They always
Right,
ask, how's
right.
Crystal? You know, we love her so much.
Crystal is my mom say, like, when people see my mom and haven't seen any of us for a while, they ask about Crystal. That's who they ask about.
Just 'cause you're so,
She's
you're
like,
so pleasant.
hi, and like when she saw me yesterday when I came, she gave me a big hug. I was like, Crystal, we're in the middle of the parking lot. Move over. She's like, sorry, it's okay. Now you can squeeze me to death, but I just wanted to get out of the way. So yeah, so that tension, that's ultimately what I realized when I got that pushback. That's where I decided where the tension was. I wanted to tell my story, and I wanted it to be real, and I wanted it to be ugly, and I wanted people who feel guilty about how they feel about their sibling to feel like they're not alone and they're not bad people, but at the same time, like, realize she's living a completely different life right next to me and isn't even judging me for being a dork. It's like, that's my tension. So that's what I'm working towards. Yes.
Along the same lines, I would love to hear a little bit more about your pushback and decision-making process between how much of your faith and
Yes.
spirituality that you added to your book versus not. You know, general audience versus more of an LDS audience. Do I tone down the language and the graphicness of my story and
Right.
make it LDS appropriate? Or do I make it more general audience, but then I have to tone down the spiritual aspect of things a little? And
Right.
balance?
So where's the balance between putting my faith in there and being real and having it be more widely acceptable to a general audience? And first you have to get clear on who it's for. Who is it for? Is it for general audience? Is it for? But the other thing is that despite all the garbage that we are being fed, a lot of people still believe in God. Most people still believe in God. And the ones who don't, but respect their fellow humans, are fine with the fact that you believe in God. So I feel like the tension there with putting your faith in there is, why is this, just ask, why is this in here? And if you have characters, that, especially fictional characters in a story, you have to ask, why are they in here? Would another character suggest as well? And if I treated, no, I'll go back into that in a second, but with the faith, why is it in here? Is it integral to the story? And how much does somebody who does not share my faith need to know about it? Because, like, if you saw a dream, you can probably leave that out. If you wouldn't tell some random human that you didn't know about this experience, if you wouldn't want them to know, then it shouldn't go in your book. Like, so if it's for a general audience, if it's for your family, by all means, put it all in there. Like, if it's appropriate to share with your family and it's for your family, you can put it all in there. But just like think, one marketing writing tactic that people use sometimes is to sit in the mall and just watch people go by and just think, what do I want them to know about this? All these people, these goofy teenagers with overly ripped jeans, all these old people who are walking faster than I ever will on their lunch break, all of these people who might read my book, what do I want them to know? And the fact is, no matter what you write, someone's gonna hate it and slime it on Amazon without even reading it first. That's just the reality of life. If it's happened, it means your book is worth noticing and it's a win for you. So the question isn't, does everyone like it? It's who likes it, who appreciates it, and who wants you to write another one so they can read more of it. Thank you. So with the disabilities, what's including, I want to spend a little time talking about who and what disabilities to put in there. I would say if you don't have personal experience with the disability, just skip it. There may be exceptions, but if you don't personally, especially like super close experience, like I met somebody with Down syndrome, now I'm gonna write a book with a main character with Downs. Maybe it could be done, but it would be really difficult to get it right. Unless you're writing like on behalf of somebody who's helping you, who's telling you what to write and you're just making it writerful. But with that, you need to ask, why is this character in here? What are they trying to accomplish? And would a different character work just as well? And that the reason for that last question, would another character work just as well, is not for the reason you think. So in the book Wonder, there's a facial difference. And he goes through similar experiences that anyone would go through. Where it gets a little bit over the top and not super awesome is when the fact that he's a hero is directly tied to his disability. So the fact that he wins in the end and yay, we all learn to accept a very ugly person. It's like, really? That's the best you can do? Like, and nobody, like, it's not realistic and we all know it, for everyone in that school to like that kid at the end of the school year. Because not everyone in that school would like me at the end of the school year. So that's what I'm talking about when you're like, would the same things happen to a different non-disabled character? That's what I'm talking about. Because that's where the believability goes in there. In Out of My Mind, which is about a girl with cerebral palsy, she flips out at the end. She's nonverbal, but her mom's about to do something she doesn't know she's going to do that's very bad. But she's nonverbal. She can't say anything about it. So she like screams and flails and wah, just make this huge noisy mess. And her mom's like, oh, why do you have, like, I'm already late, blah, blah, blah. And then does the thing anyway. And it turns out okay, and I'm not going to tell you what it was. But would that have happened to somebody else? You can totally see someone like, can't open the window, mom, 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 mom. And that could totally happen to anyone else. So that I feel like is more believable. And it feels more believable. Go ahead.
I'm just curious. Do
Yeah.
you have a more believable ending for Wonder?
Challenge accepted. The question is, do I have a more believable ending for Wonder? I would probably, if I were to write a more believable ending for Wonder, which I will share because I feel like it makes sense. It kind of cinches what we're talking about here. I would inform it from Andrew Clements's books. I don't know if you've read, he wrote Frindle. If you want believable characters who are flawed but win at the end in tiny, believable ways, Andrew Clements all day long. I would take his, actually, Almost Average has a very unbelievable ending. I was like, I should take Almost Average because that's about somebody who feels like she's too normal. But one of his books, let's see, Into the Woods, has a very, very rich person that has some bias against him because he's rich. And at the end, he helps people understand where he's coming from. Something like that, where there's a singled out, picked on character who everyone around him makes some strides in growth instead of the whole world loves him now, which is a lot more believable and feels more achievable as an author, but also as a reader. Like, I can aim for this growth, but everybody's gonna like my kid who's really weird looking is not something I can achieve. So anyway, I'm here. I want to sign your books. I didn't do it ahead of time. Go ahead.
You said that the writer is Andrew Clements?
Clements with a T.
C-L-E-M.
Clements. I'll just write it. Andrew Clements with a T. Andrew Clements.
And he writes believable, read those good things.
Yes, believable, specifically about school children doing things at school. That's his whole thing. So that's it.